Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show, Scotland's #1 politics and chat, coming at you live from Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, wherever your social media is. I am your host, Mark Devlin, and I'm here tonight with my co-hosts, Mark Ziegfeld and Mary Devlin. How are you both tonight?
Good evening, everyone.
And okay, we've got a fun-packed show this evening. What are you going to be looking at, Mary?
Well, first of all, happy Valentine's Day,
Yay.
everyone. I hope somebody loves you, even if it's just your dog or your cat.
Oh, cats don't love you.
That's true. You have to love them. Tonight, I will be talking about the ongoing fiasco, the biggest in Scottish history, the Ferry's fiasco.
Okay, Mark, what do you have for us?
I've got the crisis that's engulfing the council tax freeze.
Okay, and we will all be discussing giving nationalists a history lesson while eating some tea and scones from a local cafe. And beyond that, we, of course, will have Zoomer of the Week. So we'll be back with all that and just more, and even more, in just a minute. Okay, see you soon. Right, welcome back to the Majority Show, Scotland's #1 politics chat. I'm the host, Mark Devlin, here tonight with Mary Devlin and Mark Ziegfeld, and all of you chatters watching tonight. Is it chatters? I don't know if that's really the right word. Viewers and people making comments. Anyway, our aim is a better Scotland without the toxic nationalism that is strangling Scotland's potential. Hope that is your aim as well. We have a great show lined up for you tonight. As always, a huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages, where many of you will be watching from tonight.
And remember, sharing is caring. And the #1 thing you can do is to like this show on YouTube. Even if you don't subscribe, please drop a like. And if you can't subscribe, then please do so. Increase our reach at the click of a button.
Right, okay. You may hear the occasional beep and twinkle coming through the show. I think that was coming from Mark Ziegfeld's computer. We're trying to figure out where they were coming from earlier on, but please don't be alarmed. You're not getting mysterious text messages. Well, there's another one. Okay, what have we got now? It's coming up to Mother's Day on March the 10th, and what better way to say thanks, Mum, than with a Majority mug or Abolish Holyrood t-shirt. Did you write this, Mary?
I did.
Or just to treat yourself or someone else you know would appreciate our fine fare. Now, here we go. This is a very nice one, actually, here. This is the I love Scotland too much to be a nationalist. Women's wide neck TV. So that is very nice. You can get that there. Let's see what else we've got. Is that okay? Okay, let's just leave that alone. We also have lots of nice goodies in there, mouse mats and so on. Let me see what I'm going to do here. I'm going to try this. At reasonable prices, and whatever you put in will be will support the show. Okay.
And I will be, as usual, I'll be managing the deluge of comments. So please keep them short and snappy, and I'll try to put up as many on screen as I can.
Right. Okay. So much to discuss. So we'll be back in a second with all that and much more. Right, okay, of course, big news of the week is the stooshie at the Readcoat Cafe, which was started off a few days ago by the cafe itself, of course, but we put up a post saying it had been refurbished. Now, this wasn't such big news to people because it'd been there for 20 years or so. I think this is what it says here. We are happy to welcome you all back to our newly refurbished Readcoat Cafe. If you're visiting us over the weekend, pop in for a warm beverage or even a tasty slice of Anglophobia. No, a tasty slice of cake, in fact, it says there. Okay, so you can see Rec under there. Bill Cowan, who is a Alba Party founding member, need I say more, basically wrote, change the name, change it now. and never revisit the thought, this is not a request. And while you're at it, get rid of that disgusting foreign flag atop the castle, the butcher's apron. Edinburgh's the capital of Scotland, not Little England or Britain as she is known. Wow. This is not a request, he says. Well, what are you going to do? Send around a bunch of pensioners and their stray dogs? I don't think so. This is, that's taking grievance to a new level, perhaps. But the story didn't end there. Then it went on to, got up to the level of SNP, what they call MPs. This time, Douglas Chapman. Okay, let's see here. We have here, he says, I don't think many will be popping in for anything. Hey, Historic Environment Scotland and Edinburgh Castle, how about a swift rebrand? Readcoat, really? And of course, in this case, we see note the casual. How about a rebrand? When, of course, they control the Scottish government and they pay Historic Scotland. It's not a hey, it's a threat, of course. So some also were so outraged that they said they would firebomb the cafe, as you do.
Sick.
And a whole article here. Some doctor, what have we got here?
Have they been reported to the police?
In fact, they have. Indeed, one of our followers, the Mr. C chairman on Twitter, made a whole dossier and sent it off to the police. And the police apparently were very happy about that. So,
what do you mean happy about it?
Well, happy to have it all presented to them and said, here it is. That's what he said anyway. Okay. That's his words, not mine. Mm-hmm. Mark, would you firebomb a cafe?
I found that absolutely outrageous. I really did. I think with all the issues we've got going on in Scotland at the moment, with the drug deaths highest in Europe, with the NHS in crisis, with everything that's going on, this is the hill they want to die on.
Edinburgh Castle Hill.
A cafe that's been named the same name since 1992. Honestly, and
I think it shows then that none of them have actually been to Edinburgh Castle since 1992.
Well, most people don't go to the tourist attractions, do they? If they live here, it's quite. I mean, the main ones like that. Most people will say Edinburgh Castle is extremely busy and expensive to boot.
So how can they be so offended if they never actually go there?
Well, that's part of the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the way a politician who should know better starts this off, and it snowballs, and they just sit back and watch, and they never say anything after that. They just let everybody else, the little minions on Twitter, all put up a big fuss, all leave, get in touch with these organisations to leave a bad review of the cafe and of the castle and that, and it just snowballs and snowballs. They've actually, in the past, they've actually destroyed businesses by doing this.
Mm-hmm. Well, they tried before to boycott Tunnocks, and that was, remember that one? I don't know if you remember, but it was like three nutters from the Scottish Resistance outside Tunnocks factory, which we used to live next door to, and these old ladies, or not old, I don't know if they're that old actually, were like poking them with their umbrellas and stuff and saying, get out of here, this is our business here, basically, this is our town, what are you doing here? And of course it goes on with Walker Shortbread, Baxter Soup, and anyone who's actually in any way successful in Scotland that doesn't conform.
Well, it shows how emboldened these people are to post on Twitter and leave it on. This place needs firebombed, and then leave that on and think that is going to be acceptable in any society. That's just acceptable, and to think that is acceptable shows you where we are in Scotland and what kind of a society we're becoming. It's quite embarrassing, but it's also quite
worrying. Yeah.
That some nutter out there might say, well, yeah, okay, then I've got the okay to go and do this.
Well, that is part. Yeah. That's true. I mean, that is it's true to some extent. People do follow their, if they feel sufficiently aggrieved, and that grievance, of course, is being pushed by their leaders, then maybe some idiot would take action in that. However, we don't see so much of that. Remember Sean Clerkin going to Edinburgh Castle or the hill behind there and trying to set fire to the Union flag. It was, and not realising it was, of course, non-flammable. So they just that's the kind of level we've got, this kind of idiocy. But stranger things have happened. Idiots have done things that have had big effect on the world, sadly.
Grumpy Git is saying here that another Nat was calling for a bombing campaign.
Yeah, I saw that.
Right. Well, yes, that's not very good. I mean, but leaving bad reviews on Twitter is bad. Not Twitter, TripAdvisor is bad enough. We've seen a few examples of that. Unfortunately, I don't have one up here. Just like, I thought the tea was great, but you really need to change the name and stuff like that. Like as if that's the kind of common comment that a person would actually have there.
I believe TripAdvisor has now suspended the
comments,
so they don't, because they've got that many false ones. They've actually suspended it.
But I mean, what kind of person does that? I mean, just like, okay, I don't like the name of this, so I'm going to write a negative review about a cafe. It's a cafe. It's not Culloden, which we'll come on to in just a second. So now some people have said that, including Mark just there, said that, it's been there for 20 years. I don't actually think that's all that important because, if it was poorly named, then, if historically named, you see, it could be changed. There were, you get sometimes these stories about roads, Little Slave Lane or something like that, or those type of things. And people want to change the name or other names with different connotations. And then, of course, there's usually a bit of a rumpus between the people who live there and the woke brigade, usually, who are wanting to change these names. But nonetheless, the names can be changed. But I think the real thing in this is historical accuracy and building a grievance, as Mark also said here. And the historical accuracy comes in two parts. I think quick questions. Was Culloden a battle that oppressed Scots? And is the word redcoats an offensive word in Scottish history? So nationalists would like to frame Culloden as the last noble fight between England and Scotland, but it was anything but. As we know, most of us who have any little bit of historical knowledge or have read Wikipedia even on occasion, know that Bonnie Prince Charlie was fighting to give his Catholic father the crown, while the son of George II, who is Duke of Cumberland, was fighting to retain it for his. Basically a kind of Protestant versus Catholic fight really at that time. Maybe even a very British civil war, because a third of the soldiers of Cumberland's army consisted of Lowland Scots, and plus over 600 Scottish Highland clansmen. It says here, his army consisted of also one battalion of militia raised from Clan Campbell, Scottish Highlanders, plus other Scottish clans that fought on the British side included Monroe, Ross, Sutherland, Grant, Cathcart, Colville, Semple, Kerr and Cunningham. So not England versus Scotland, but English and Scots versus English and Scots in that case. So the other thing they often talk about is the atrocities that the Duke of Cumberland perpetrated after the battle as well. Surely no true Scotsman would be part of would commit such heinous crimes against their own kith and kin. But we only need to go to the SNP House paper, The National, which says, what happened next is Scotland's secret shame, for it was not just English troops under Cumberland that carried out atrocity after atrocity in the search for Charles and the remaining Jacobites, but also Scots, many of them who were Highlanders themselves. Those who were loyal to George II went on punitive raids into Lochaber and Shirramore. Right, so basically the historical record says, no, this wasn't actually a plucky fight between Scotland and England at all. So why should nationalists find that particularly important? The second part, though, I think is a bit more interesting, is that are redcoats seen as being offensive in Scottish history? Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard that before. Is there any Scottish insult, for example, that says, you're a nasty redcoat?
I've never heard of any, certainly.
No, it's not like that. And in fact, go ahead, Mark.
It's not seen throughout history. It's not seen as when you talk about the Nazi sign in the uniform, the black uniform they used to wear, and that, it's never been the same as talking about the redcoats. The redcoats is just in history, in historical terms, the redcoat was used by the British Army so they could identify each other during battle. That's why they initially wore the red jackets. So this idea that it's some sort of a bad thing that throughout history. It's not seen as a bad thing throughout history. It's never has been. So it's just I find it quite. I find the way people see history, especially the Scottish nationalists, is quite. It's a different history to what we've witnessed or read about or did at school. It's just complete different history. They're rewriting their own history.
Well, they're trying to do that, certainly. I mean, but, even Tom Devine, who is perhaps Scotland's leading historian, actually who voted yes in the independence campaign, said, the view that the name of the cafe is offensive to Scots is simply ludicrous and reflects historical illiteracy. Scottish officers, soldiers, and kilted Highland regiments have had a high profile in the British Army from the 7 Years' War, which is 1756, especially during the famous battles for empire, and like the rest of the infantry, wore red or scarlet tunics until the later 19th century, I guess, when camouflage started to come in. And, of course, see the famous painting of the Thin Red Line by Robert Gibb, which shows the 93rd Highlanders confronting Russian cavalry in the Battle of Balaclava. Now, that's the actual thumbnail for this show here. Now, by the way, Devine got nationalist flack last year for saying that independence was dead. And it's quite interesting, in the national newspaper, they warped that sentence I just said to you to basically say that some Scots were offended by it. It's a bit much. But why do you think they want to warp history, Mark?
Because they want to see a narrative that supports independence, and they want to show the British institution in a bad light, and they want to see Scotland in a good history, in a good light, when everybody's history, every country's history has good and has bad. You don't become an empire by just without having dark times and dark history, but you have the good and the bad together. It's history. Whatever's happened, it's happened. So you can't then just change that history. Scottish history is full of good and bad as well. Like every country. And this idea of the British Empire, Scotland played a huge part in the British Empire, a huge part. And to rewrite that as the UK, the British Empire was just England, and the bad things were just England, because that's the British Empire, and Scotland's different to that. It's just, I find it quite interesting and quite incredible that they forget the kind of part that Scotland played in the British Empire.
Well, they're trying to erase that, aren't they? I mean, I think the only people that you could say that might have some kind of grievance against the Redcoats would be Americans. But as far as I know, I don't think any Americans have been complaining on TripAdvisor about the Redcoats.
Well, the Scottish, even if you watch Outlander, Jamie Fraser, he fought for the Redcoats to begin with, and as did many Scots. Someone said in the comments, Flora MacDonald's brothers fought for the British. Why? Of course they would fight for the British. They saw themselves as being British at that time. Now, some, of course, saw themselves as being rebels, but it wasn't like all the Scots in America somehow were all the rebels. That's not the way it worked. Anyway, we're getting a bit sidetracked in that sense. I think there's some kind of a little bit of they want to think that everyone in Scotland must have the same viewpoint. You must think that to be a true Scot, you must think that the Redcoats are bad. This is it. This is the latest thing. Of course, if you thought that they weren't bad, what kind of person are you? Then you're in a whole load of defence, right? You're having to do what we're doing in this show tonight. Defend yourself. Oh, history, blah, 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 blah. By that time, they've already said, you're just saying Redcoats are bad. And that message spreads quite well, doesn't it? Because it's a message that we are victims as Scots, are not actually a proud race or great, but we're actually victims of the English who have oppressed us throughout history. And it's just this sense of victimhood is to try and build political advantage, I think, is one of the real problems of modern Scotland. I don't think Scots are particularly victims. And certainly when it comes to the colonial era, as Mark says, they really weren't. They were part of the empire. But the idea that Scotland could become perpetual victims, I think, is open to any grievance, is I don't think is good for any kind of nation. I don't think it's good for people even to think pure psychology. I mean, I'll just point out Ireland is like that. Ireland had its independence in 1916, and then they're still blaming England and Britain for stuff. I watched a movie that not a movie, it was called The Guard or something, like Prison Guard or something, and it was full of anti-British sentiment, and that was just made a couple of years ago. So I just it seems very lazy to me, this type of grievance-ridden politics. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, you could. I like to put it this way: when you think of, like for instance, Germany, and you think of the war, the SS, they wore a particular uniform, and that's when you look at that uniform or you think of that uniform, you think of all the atrocities that Germany did during the war. It's different with the red coat, because it was the British Empire, the British Army wore the red. They wore that red coat, and it's not seen as the same in the same light, and it shouldn't be seen as the same light, because, as I said earlier, it was the point of wearing the red uniform was so the British could identify during battles the fellow fighters. So that was the reason for wearing it. So I don't understand the connotation of that that this idea of the red coat is seen as a dark time or a dark part.
No, I don't think. I mean, you can look at Nazi uniforms. I think you're right. You look at Nazi uniforms, and you, of course, we're all reminded of the famous sketch. Are we the baddies? They've got the death head, the death skulls and crossbones on there. We were watching. It's actually almost difficult to watch some kind of Nazi thing. We were watching Das Boot the other day, and they have the German uniforms on, and they come on with the SS uniforms with the skull and crossbones. You can just immediately think of that sketch, like, are we the baddies? And you know that because it represents something that was quite really a terrible time in history. But first of all, and also it's more recent as well. So we're really dredging the depths
yeah,
to try and get something out of this. But you just, as I said, it's so lazy. One day you're said this before. One day you're annoyed at English TV commentators calling Andy Murray British, and then the next day you've got your face painted blue and you're walking down the street with a bunch under a saltire. That's the kind of nonsense we're up against, and shouting about the redcoats. I mean, what kind of society is that we're trying to do here now? Okay, so it's. I think as well that this is kind of the sign of a dying movement, actually. That, I mean, this is all they can think about, because they've got nothing else to think about. There's no path to a referendum. I was talking to someone today on Twitter, and I said, what's the plan then? So independence is inevitable. What's the plan? Oh, we don't have a plan, but it will happen naturally. Like, okay, so you don't have a plan. Great, thanks for admitting that. And, that's the thing. If they don't have a plan, what have they got left? They've got nothing to go for. So the most minor thing will be amplified, I think. And this is a good point, actually, here. Martin says roll on whenever they are going to be elected again, because that question is and always has been, why are ordinary Scots not looking at this and going, what the hell is this? We just get rid of this from our society. And the only way to do that, I think, is to beat them at the elections. Mark.
Yeah, it's like Minions, isn't it? It gets to the end of the cliff, and it's like, well, what do we do now? Well, we just jump, see what happens.
Right.
And that's what they expect us to do. They want us to just jump and say, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We have an idea that it's not going to be rosy, but let's just see how it goes, and let's just jump and see how independence goes. I'm sorry, but most of us think, well, no, our families, we've got to look after our families, and we can see that independence would be an absolute disaster, especially economically, for the country. So until like you say, they come up with some sort of plan and tell everybody and show everybody, and it's stop lying, because that's what we see from the nationalists at the moment. Is it's just consistently, and we're seeing it from politicians, from SNP politicians, from Greens. It's lie after lie after lie that you can easily research and easily find.
Yeah, but the problem is the lie, as I said earlier, the lie goes around the world, before the truth has a chance to pull up its pants, or some such expression from Mark Twain. That's the thing. So these lies are effective. They do hit certain people in a certain way, and I mean, as you say, we're lucky that it's not really at the level of it's so far back and it's so remote a grievance. Is anyone really going to? I mean, Firebomb Cafe, because it's called Readcoats. You're like, I mean, you have to be pretty, really, really, not just a normal nutter to do that. You have to be an extreme, really, one of a kind nutter, which could exist, I suppose. But it's not like there's a whole bunch of people going, yeah, of course we should firebomb the cafe. It's not like that, right? It's certainly don't feel like that. So, will though nationalism ever go back to the level where it was only supported by around 5% of cranks, nutters, and Nazi supporters and Anglophobes, or will it always be a threat? Mark, you have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, say that again. I didn't quite.
Will nationalism go back to the levels it used to be in, say, the 80s or so on, or do you think there's still life in it?
I don't think it'll go back that far. I don't think it's going anywhere, but I do think it's become more and more apparent that people are starting to see through the lies that they've been telling. I think people are starting to ask questions, and I do think it's gone backwards, nationalism, and I do think it will become pretty much irrelevant within the next few years. And I think they're going to find their level of what they are, and that's a grievance party, the SNP. I think they've had their chance at independence. They blew that. People voted in record numbers to stay in the UK, and I don't think they've not moved it any forward since then. And I do think the court case was pretty pivotal in my eyes. Now they've been told that a referendum is the say-so of the UK government and nobody else. And I think that was quite a pivotal moment in Sturgeon's time, and nationalists are starting to see that they're not going to see independence.
Mm-hmm, certainly, that's the case. So on Twitter, some people said that it should be renamed to something that reflects modern Scotland, the impounded caravan. Oh, no, impounded camper van. So I didn't read that right. Would have been better if I read it right. The fallen scooter, the angry nationalist. But the winner was the Branch Farm Cafe. And then it was revealed, though, by Scott Facts on Twitter that the real reason the cafe is called Readcoats is because it's part of a pair. One side is called the Readcoats and the other side is called the Jacobites. There it is there. So it's actually some kind of not actually based on any kind of grievance at all or any historical wrong. It's just a bit of balance and maybe a historical idea of maybe even a little bit of humour there in that.
But they are renaming both of them.
Yes, I mean, that's what they would have to do, wouldn't they? They would have to do that. Now, an interesting thing I do think about this a little bit is this claims to victimhood, historical victimhood. I mean, how can people like Humza Yousaf claim those, right? The Redcoats and the Jacobites weren't part of his ancestral history, right? Or most of the new Scots that are coming to Scotland. So can they really have a say in that? They have to be quiet, right? Taking on another culture's grievance is quite weird. But when we think about that, I mean, many of us are imports to Scotland. My family came in 1850s or whatever it was. and they didn't deal with the Jacobites or any of that nonsense either. So what's it to do with them? What's it to do with most of the inhabitants of Scotland right now? It's not got anything to do with any of us at all. But what does matter to us right now is these false allegations and trying to create political capital out of a grievance that's 100 years old. It doesn't really affect people. So we need to reject that wherever we can. And in my opinion, that's the Scottish thing to do. We will be back in a few moments where Mark is going to talk about the council freeze. That's coming up or not. I don't know. Mark will enlighten us on that. So we'll see you in just a second. Right, Mark. Oh, did I miss a bit? All right, we'll do bonus and then we'll talk about that. Okay, Mark, off you go.
The council tax freeze, it's reared its ugly head again. COSLA have announced that they are at loggerheads with the Scottish Government over the council tax freeze. They say there's a deadline set by Shona Robinson that the 16th of February, the councils had to contact the Scottish Government on whether they're going to be doing this council tax freeze. And by all accounts, the councils have announced they will not be answering the request. The date will not be, they won't meet that date. So what they're going to be doing is, raising the council taxes, I presume, which is
right. So sorry, I didn't quite get it. So basically, what's happened? I haven't been following this story, so if you can enlighten me for how it works. So the Scottish government wants to freeze council tax.
They want to freeze the council tax, and they've given the councils a deadline of the February the 16th
which is Friday, right?
Which is Friday.
It's Friday.
To get back to the government on the council tax freeze, on whether they're going to be doing it. And the councils have stated that that date won't be met, and they won't be contacting the Scottish Government by the February the 16th. And COSLA have come out and stated that they're at loggerheads over the council tax freeze because it's not being funded properly by the Scottish Government, who promised to fund it fully, but now backtracked on that because they can't afford what it's going to cost for the town to do it properly for every council.
But they don't actually have the power to enforce this, right? Other than bullying the councils.
No, the councils. The council tax is up to each individual council to set the council tax, or whether to have the freeze or not, and they will set their own council tax at their own level of what they want or what they need. And the government have no say in that whatsoever. But what can happen, and we know would happen with this government, with the SNP, they can penalise them by dropping their budgets.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what Alan Jack is saying. He's saying councils which ignore it and raise the tax are to be denied funding from Holyrood.
Yeah.
Now, one of the main criticisms against this is, as Catherine points out, the freeze is regressive as it favours better off people, but cuts essential services for those who need them. So if the councils can't raise their council tax, then it's the people in the band E's and F's and G's and H's or whatever that save the most. It's not the lower, the lower bands. And it means that the councils are having to cut all the services because they're not bringing in enough money.
So on. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Humza promised that it would be fully funded by the Scottish Government. But what they didn't realise that some councils need it higher, and some councils can do with it, can do it at a certain level. And some councils are saying, well, we need to raise it significantly to fund the council, to fund because of the funding cuts already that we've seen over the years. They were having to raise it a bit higher. But it just goes to the point again of Humza doing policies on the back of a postage stamp. Standing there thinking,
on the hoof. Yeah.
I need a good news story. I need a good news story to announce at conference. And he decided this with a couple of couple of people, and they decided to do this. They didn't announce it to COSLA. They didn't announce it to even their own party. The Greens were shocked at this, and it didn't go through cabinet, which we've seen during COVID inquiry, that they say every decision they make or every policy they do is done by cabinet. Well, that's a lie. That's a lie, because it's obviously this wasn't done through cabinet because the cabinet didn't know anything about it. It was done on the night of Humza's big speech. So it just shows you again that it's a one man's party now. It was a one woman's party in Nicola Sturgeon. Now it's Humza's party who will decide policy. And why do we have cabinet ministers?
Ultimately, the issue is that the Scottish government is always going to try and take money from wherever it can, and keep it for itself, for its own pet projects. That's just inevitable. Every power structure does that. This is of course, it wants power, and it wants to keep power, wants to grab power, wants money, and needs money as well. So it's no surprise that this has happened, of course, and this is one of the things that Labour, of course, and should have seen when they said we were going to do this devolved administration, that they should have known that it would have attracted, taken money away from local authorities. So now we're in this situation where local authorities are being deprived of funds based on the Scotland's national priorities, which many of us will know are being driven by the Greens. So you're getting, councils are seeing money that's ring fenced for bike lanes and stuff that's not actually useful to their inhabitants. And the actual stuff that is useful to them, libraries, swimming pools, and stuff like that, is being cut all the time. And I'm not just talking about that. Of course, there's education and so on, all being cut because of work priorities. Because the whole point of devolution was supposed to be get power closer to the people and put the funding closer to the people. What it's done is actually it's removed it from many of these local authorities and put the power and the money into the central government. And that's really not good. And certainly, we did run a poll actually and said if we did abolish Holyrood, what would we replace it with? And basically, the idea was equal funding or equal attention between the UK government and local authorities.
Well, this week, Edinburgh Council, there's been talk about Edinburgh Council going bankrupt because of the buy-to-lets.
Yes.
That we've talked about on this show before.
Yep.
And they're saying because of that, Edinburgh Council could well be going bankrupt. Mm-hmm. So again, I think it's a crisis. It's a crisis in the making, this with the councils, the budget with the councils, and the council tax freeze. I think it could turn into a real big crisis, because if the funding's not there.
Well, I actually think that local councils should actually rise up.
Yeah.
And they should basically say, we don't want funded from the Scottish Government anymore. We want funded directly from Westminster, because we don't want our money siphoned off onto what's going on there. And certainly, Conservative-led councils should be doing that. And certainly in the borders, why do we have to do this? We just, we talk to their people. They should say, we want to run a referendum in our local authority on whether we should be funded from the UK government or not. And that's, you see what the results are then. It's an ongoing situation, certainly, and we'll keep an eye on it. Have you liked this show so far? If not, please do like it, because that's what gets us up in the algorithm and gives us more viewers. As well as you can also donate to the show. We're going to do a very short segment on Humza Yousaf going on holidays. Where did he go on holidays? Would it be Disneyland? No, it might be somewhere else indeed. We'll be back with that in just a second. So our First Minister of Gaza went to Qatar on his holidays. Qatar, I think you say, not Qatar. Qatar is when you got a cough, isn't it? Anyway, so he went to Qatar on his holidays, as you do, said Andrew Neil, in fact. The journalist, he said he was quite surprised that he went there. Is that one there is? Humza Yousaf and his wife off to Qatar on holiday, as you do. Now, I have to say that while I was in the pub this afternoon, Hungry Horse, having my lunch, an ad for Qatar holidays did come up on the screen there, but
I didn't think anyone would actually take that seriously.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. But why is he in Qatar? Could it just be a coincidence that the entire head of Hamas is there?
No,
No, it's not a coincidence, Mary. You don't think so?
no.
No. Or that it is a state funder of extremist groups, funds Al Jazeera, or supports the Muslim Brotherhood and the Taliban. Could it be any of those things, Mary?
Well, Stuart's suggesting that he could be picking up a stash for his brother-in-law.
No. I
Do
don't
they
think
have a lot of drugs in Qatar?
No,
I think that'd be the wrong
they're
place
not
to go.
a producer. I think you have to go to Afghanistan for that. Probably next on his itinerary. Anyway,
Well, I mean, there's lots of entertainment available in Qatar. I mean, a nice flogging at 2:00 and maybe a little stoning, go and visit a evening stoning at 6:00. You know, there's lots to do.
yes, okay, perhaps, but it does seem.
But I think you should really be worried because don't they have a death penalty for adulterers?
Oh, Mary. Oh, yes. Well,
I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just, for people who commit adultery.
Well, there is that. I mean, it does seem very strange that visiting there on a holiday when they have so much going on pro-Hamas nonsense. Once again, Stephen Flynn, Skeletor called for a ceasefire, as if Scotland can make the difference in any of this. I think really Scots would rather that the First Minister of Gaza worked to improve the lives of Scots rather than improving the Middle East. It's enough of a mess already without getting Humza Yousaf involved. In fact, they should be saying, what the hell is he getting involved for? He's failed in everything he did. What's he doing here?
I've been told Rita's telling me it's just the women who get stoned for adultery.
Let's go to Qatar and get stoned as it goes, or you could just go to Amsterdam.
It puts a different meaning on it, doesn't it?
Bother. Anyway, what's we got? Right, okay, that was that. No, okay, Mary's going to be here in a second. I'm going to talk about the ferries fiasco.
Well, before that, I'm really hoping, Mark, that you're going to have some nice Valentine message for me.
Oh yes. Well, that's coming up. That's coming up.
I'm excited.
It's amazing. I've got a poem here.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a Valentine's poem just for you, and it will come up in just a second. Although I have to say, it's not all that romantical. It's okay. Funnels are red, windows are black. Taxpayers will never get their money back.
Oh, that speaks to my heart, that does.
There you go. Right.
That speaks the truth. Okay. Well, I guess you're talking about the ferries fiasco.
Yes, indeed.
I'll just repeat that. Funnels are red, windows are black. Taxpayers will never get their money back. Ain't that the truth? Well, it's been quite a while since we talked about Scotland's shameful ferry crisis, and it's easily one of the biggest fiascos of the SNP and Green government. And I'll say that's a high bar to cross, isn't it? If that's one of the biggest fiascos. So we haven't talked about the ferries much recently, but plenty has been happening. In fact, even in 1 week, do you want to know what's been happening in just 1 week? Yes. I will give you the latest ferry news and what's going on. And I will actually start with some good news. This week, and that won't take very long.
Right, okay.
This week, the Glen Sannox, the ferry that Nicola Sturgeon launched 7 years ago from Ferguson Marine with its painted-on windies, has started its sea trials. Yay! Right, that's it. Good news is over. Okay. Well, its sister ship, the Glen Rossa, that was meant to be delivered to Calmac in August of 2018, that's now scheduled for May 2025. Now, about twice or three times a year, we get new dates of when these ferries are going to sail, and God knows if they actually ever will. It looks like the Glen Sannox might. The Glen Rossa, I don't know. They've got endless... the construction's constantly plagued by design challenges, cost overruns, delays. And the original cost, as we all know, the original budget was £97 million, and we're probably looking now at closer to about £450 million. But another headline this week is that the Ardrossan, we've now got something, the ferries fiasco, we've now got the Ardrossan harbour debacle.
Right.
It's been described as big a farce as the ferry fiasco. So they're now competing with each other to see who can do the worst. And what that's about is that the Arran ferries can no longer berth at Ardrossan. they've actually closed it for good because of safety issues, and they say that there's been too much increased wear and tear, which has been caused by the increased use. Now, the current Arran ferry is unable to use there was an alternative Ardrossan berth, and it couldn't use that either. So it was sent to Ayr, but now it's providing freight only services from Drune.
Oh, really?
So it's an absolute disaster. But if you remember, it was Humza Yousaf when he was the transport minister, and he gave the green light for the major upgrade at Ardrossan back in 2018. And we're now coming up to 6 years later. But even in 2022, the business minister, Ivan McKee, he insisted that the harbour and the port infrastructure at Ardrossan would be ready to take the 2 new ferries when they finally set sail. But that ain't going to happen. But all along, CalMac has actually been planning to use Drune rather than Ardrossan for the 2 ferries that are going to serve Arran.
Okay.
I mean, it's just one disaster after another, and they seem to be at odds with each other about what they're planning and what's happening. We found out also this week that CalMac's spend on unplanned maintenance of the ageing ferry fleet has more than trebled in 5 years, and now it's about £16 million they've spent on unexpected repairs. Now, that's because the ferry, the whole fleet is really old. I think more than half of them are past the 25-year lifespan that you're supposed to have for a ferry, something like that. And they're now spending £500,000 a month on maintenance. Yeah.
Right.
So
well, I was looking at this thing today, at this picture of it here, as you see that. And I mean, it looks like it's 30 years old already. You see all that crumpling on the side. And I was asking people on their on Twitter and social media what they thought of that. And I think there wasn't a very good impression of this at all. I mean, compare that with, this is the pictures of the new Manxman ferry here. This one cost 80 million.
Well, it looks quite sleek, doesn't it?
Yes, it's sleek. And you can see there in this, you can see how it's smooth, right? Smooth at the sides. That's the way, I mean, most ships are supposed to be, not like a rumpled old piece of, tissue.
They haven't ironed it yet.
Yeah, exactly. Papier-mâché. Is that how you say it? Paper-mâché?
Papier-mâché.
That's the one. I remember when I was young, I used to make all those the models like that. And, that's what they ended up looking exactly like. This thing, I mean, it's unbelievable, actually, isn't it? Is this the quality of Scottish shipbuilding? Clyde built? What does that mean? It looks rusty and just all dents and stuff like that. I mean, it's just rubbish. It looks
Well, remember that at the moment there are 4 other CalMac vessels that are actually being constructed in Turkey.
Right, well, that's probably better, isn't it?
The first of them, the MV Isle of Islay, is due to be launched next month. It's expected, it's going to be launched next month, but it will be delivered later this year. So they're getting on with it. They know how to build ferries.
Well, there's a lot of shipbuilding there, certainly, and they do know what they're doing. And
I know, but how did we ever get to the point where Scottish shipbuilders that were once the envy of the world are now put to shame by the Turks?
Well, this isn't entirely fair, because there are Scottish shipbuilders, there's British BAE systems on the Clyde producing destroyers and military ships with no trouble whatsoever. They don't look like they've, like a crushed can of iron brew. They look proper and they can do their job. And there's a lot of money going into those as well. What we have here is a project that was designed, by a committee. It's built for political purposes, not actually for the purposes of transporting passengers from A to B. As they say, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. So this is a camel made out of steel.
Pretty much. Well, I think we should never, whenever we're discussing ferries, we should also keep in mind the people who are actually suffering on the islands. We're very fond of Arran, and I know that I think this is my now 3rd year of talking about the ferries fiasco and how the people are suffering on the islands. And these ferries are always referred to as lifeline ferries, and they really are a lifeline to these communities, and it's them that are suffering while all of this shenanigans is going on.
It's destroyed lives. If you watch that documentary that was on, that program that was on the telly, it's broken up families and it's destroyed lives. This is quite an absolute scandal of the highest quality. This is a real big scandal in Scotland, and I we're talking about redcoats and changing changing names of cafes, and that's what they're concentrating on. Where this is actually, this crisis, this scandal is destroying lives. It's destroying businesses. It's splitting up families because kids who go to school on the mainland are having to stay on the mainland instead of going back home because they can't rely on the ferry. It's destroying people's livelihoods. It's splitting up families, and it's an absolute travesty what's gone on in Scotland with this.
Absolutely.
And we're nowhere near to having a full, a fleet of ferries that are workable, that the islanders need to survive on. We're nowhere near.
Well, here's an interesting fact. Since 2010, only 5 vessels have been launched for CalMac. Before 2010, they used to produce a new ship every 14 months, so basically one a year. But since then, the ferries are typically being produced every 33 months, so it's basically they're getting one every 3 years.
You would think that again that they would be hoarding money, maybe to do stuff like that. Build your projects. Well, actually, they have been hoarding money, it and spending it too much. So, and that's another example of centralised spending that is depriving councils of their funds. That's a good segment there, Mary. Thank you for that. Let's see, where are we at? Okay. Things you can do right now to support the show. You can make a donation to the Majority's 2024 crowdfunder. Just go to our website, and that is themajority.scot, or look it up in Google. That's the easiest way. And now we have a nice wee button at the side where you can do a donation. I'm even going to show you it right now. It's right down there. There it is. Right.
Where?
It's on the side. See the side there? Little blue,
right.
And you click that,
okay.
And off it comes with it. Oh, there's a donation form right there. It's amazing. Right. Very easy to do that, and every donation you put in is most appreciated. Many of you have donated, of course, to the show so far, and we love you for that.
Especially on Valentine's Day.
Yes, it is.
Well, we do rely on those donations to keep the lights on and keep the heating on so we don't freeze, and keep the software running and so on.
Think of us in a cave. We're in a cave doing this right now, with wolves at the door.
Well, anyway. Mark Zegfeld looks as if he's got a nice setup there, I have to say. He looks very comfy.
It's not even a green screen, it's real. Okay, anyway, you can also buy a t-shirt or a mug, and you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, or leave a like. We love your likes. That is great. Please also do tell your friends about us. And that's good, because we do need to. That was one of the things I wanted to say earlier, is please tell your friends about this nonsense, because, decent people must react against this and say, this is not what Scotland's about. Scotland isn't this kind of country that, we want to bully cafes on false pretenses into submitting to our political whims. That's never what Scotland was about. So please do get your friends involved. And if you can do all of the above, that'd be great, because it makes us feel worthwhile, underlined and exclamation point. So coming up, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It is the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay.
Right.
Well, just people who have pointed out about the noise of the messages coming through, we do know about it. I'm sorry we haven't been able to stop.
I do have to apologise. It's completely my fault. So
we will get it sorted for the next time.
I'm using a new computer, and I forgot to turn. I didn't realise about the notifications, so I do.
There it is again.
I think I'll just mute you until it's your section. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So that's finally muted. There we go. Anyway, my Zoomer is Douglas Chapman, MP, who, as though his comments in the Readcoat Cafe weren't bad enough, the SNP ex-treasurer, imagine having that job, had to apologise for sharing social media messages claiming that nationalist voters who switched to Labour are supporting English colonial rule. Oh, well, let's see what we've got here. Okay. The episode started when Graham Downey, Labour's candidate for Dunfermline and Dollar, shared a picture on Twitter of himself and activists on the campaign trail, alongside a message claiming that Tory and SNP voters are switching to his party. Well, that is the truth. Chapman, who's going to stand down at the next election, then shared a message containing the same picture with the heading. Well, let's have a look at it. There it is there. Okay. Scottish votes for English rule. Vote Labour for English colonial rule. Good,
What an
really.
idiot.
He certainly wins a prize for numbers of lies and misinformation, misdirections in one sentence. Vote Labour for English rule. Well, there's some Anglophobia. Colonial rule. Scotland isn't a colony, of course. English rule. Forgets the pivotal role of Scottish Labour constituencies in the forthcoming election, and also again English rule is not. We live in Britain. We don't have English rule. That's 4 in just a few sets of things. Question I have. Oh, this is the thing here. The question I have is: when are ordinary Scots going to wake up from this? When are we going to deprogram this country from this nationalist bullshit? That's what I'd like to know. And how long is it going to take? Perhaps at the next election. But I'll tell you, I never want to hear the word colony ever again with respect to Scotland. It's just nonsense. Please do your part to stop it wherever you can and call it out when you can as well. So for just being an arse, actually, and this guy twice, he started this Readcoats thing, which is basically Anglophobia based on a false historical premise, and also did this thing here. I think he is a good candidate for.
I think you're definitely
Zimmer.
a strong contender there, Mark.
But Mary, you always come up with something really good. That's the thing. Right, so Mary is going to be up next with her Zoomer of the Week.
Okay, here goes. My Zoomer of the Week is Neil Gray. Neil, in all his wisdom, has pledged to fix Scotland's NHS. A promise we know full well will come to absolutely nothing. So just this week, Neil Gray replaced the disgraced, that's how he shall be forever known, this is disgraced Michael Matheson as Scotland's Health Secretary, and not before time. Good riddance to him.
Well, he's still an MP. He's still an MSP.
Okay, that's our next step. We have to get him sacked as an MSP. Although I think that's going with what happened to what's her name before. It's going to take a Ferrier. She was an MP, but it could take a long time. Anyway, now we've got Neil Gray, who has come into his new position, and he has absolutely no experience in the health sector. Because you're thinking, if he's going to fix the NHS, oh God, he must really know something, right? But no, of course not. He worked for BBC Radio Orkney and as a researcher for the SNP before becoming an MSP.
Okay.
So he did accept that it will be a challenging proposition.
And how much a budget is this? Like billions
of pounds he's in charges. Right. And he's very confident that he has the chops to succeed in turning around the Scottish National Health Service. Although he was unable to give details of what those reforms would be. But he did say that he was planning to take forward ideas from his disgraced predecessor, Michael Matheson. So at this point, guys, I think we know for sure that absolutely nothing is going to change. His delusions of his own ability and the abilities of his SNP and Green colleagues know no bounds. We're in a situation where we've got 1 in 6 of Scotland's population is on the waiting list, the equivalent of almost 830,000 people waiting for some kind of treatment. So when the next health secretary is appointed in the near future, the very near future, he will probably have the same empty promises. Scotland's NHS under the SNP and Greens will never improve. It will get worse because men like Neil Gray, who have no competence or experience to deliver.
Oh, it's quite powerful, Mary, I have to say. I mean, I was quite surprised to find out he's only 35 or something. He looks much older. Certainly in SNP, maybe SNP, being SNP MP, MSP.
Well, maybe BBC Radio Orkney was very stressful.
Perhaps. But of course, he doesn't have a clue. He's got no life experience at all. We talked about this many times in the show. If you want to run the health thing with millions of people in it, maybe talk to some people who are at the top of that. I mean, of course, they're civil servants and so on, but it's the political decisions that have to be made as well with an understanding what's going on. I mean, Michael Matheson, how long was he doing it? Rubbish. Didn't do anything. They just sit there, take their salaries, and he's taking his golden handshake as well.
A&E times are worse. Waiting times are worse.
Parachute or whatever it is. Yep. Right? Absolute rubbish.
Have you brought in Mark Z on any of these now?
No, he's Mark's
is he still?
Yeah. Right, but anyways, we're coming up to that Mark's Zoomer, so get ready, everyone. It's going to be amazing, I'm sure. Okay, here we go. Right, Mark, you're up.
Yes, I'm back. Apparently, according to some of the comments, the Zoom of the week should be me. So
That's
I haven't
good.
seen that, really.
I may have to put
Going to
myself
vote for yourself?
for the notifications. Anyway, my historic Scotland is my pick, purely because they backed down to bullies and thugs on internet by having a look at the name of the Readcoat Cafe, and for doing that, which I think sends a real bad signal out there, and it's a bad precedent to set, is to allow bullies and thugs to win over and make them change the name. I would have, if I was them, I would have stuck with the name and said, tough, you know, it's been that for 20 years and the name will stick. You can't allow these kind of people, you can't allow thugs to win out and threats, because where does that lead to? The next thing will be the same, and that's why I think the way they've handled this has been pretty poor.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's
I mean,
a kind of revision of history, no?
Yeah, I think the jury's out a little bit in that one, because they've not decided yet. I mean, I think if they decided to back down, but we haven't seen if they've actually done that yet, right?
Look, they're doing they're going to have a look at it, but they're going to have a consultation on changing both of the names, which I still think I think they should have come out with a strong statement of
historical
not
facts.
go down to bullies and threats.
Yes.
But on social,
Well, they're just servants. So I don't know if they can actually really do that.
Someone's saying here that start a petition. Now, I actually tweeted there is a petition going around. So if you look in my feed, you'll see that that was posted out earlier today. So if you feel strongly about this, then please sign the petition for them not to change the name.
Okay, so we are with Mark, who's going to decide. We have 3 candidates. We have 4 candidates actually. We have yourself for bonging and binging all the way through the show. We have Neil Gray for not knowing anything about the NHS. We have who else we got? And we have Doug Chapman as well, and Historic Scotland. So please.
Right. I'm tempted to go with myself and say I'm the Zoom of the week.
No.
What I think I'm going to go with Mark's.
Oh, yes, another win.
Who is it?
Another win. It's Doug Chapman. Yes, Doug Chapman, who put this thing up. We saw it. Scottish votes for English. I mean, come on. Be serious. That's just absolutely pathetic. It really is. Really shocking behaviour by our elected representatives. And we really need to take a good look at ourselves as a country.
Well, I think your message this week, Mark Devlin, has been that Scotland can do better.
Yes, we can, of course. Of course, we can always do better. And, I mean, this is the thing. It's not... Making Scotland better isn't the preserve of nationalists. Nationalists don't get... If anything, they've made the country worse. So it's not their preserve. They don't speak for Scotland. They don't have a majority of anyway. And I think this is the part of it we have the majority, and we need to be better represented. And that part of that representation is talking to your friends and people around you to say, this isn't acceptable. Let's change things for the better. Thank you very much for being with us on our show every week. We're so glad to have you with us on Wednesday evening. We'll see you again next week at the same time, 7 p.m. My thought for the week is Helen of Troy had a face that launched 1,000 ships. And Nicola Sturgeon had a face that couldn't get 2 ferries launched. So, all right. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all your messages that came in. Thank you, Jim. That's great. And we will see you again next week.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Valentine's.
Good evening.
All right. Take care.